The heart monitor beeped like a countdown, marking the 3 days the doctor said I had left. Gavin squeezed my hand, but instead of comfort, his grip crushed my swollen fingers. My husband of 5 years leaned in, masking a smile behind fake tears, and whispered, "Finally, free." When I miraculously opened my eyes 72 hours later, I realized I had to survive for one reason. I needed to make him regret that I did not die according to plan. My name is Elena Vance, and I was supposed to be a corpse by now. I lay in the sterile silence of the intensive care unit at Providence Hospital in Seattle, surrounded by the rhythmic hissing of ventilators and the sharp scent of antiseptic. My body felt like a hollow shell, ravaged by what the doctors initially called a severe reaction to food poisoning, but which had quickly spiraled into multi-organ failure. I stared at the ceiling tiles and forced my mind to replay the moment that had severed my heart before my body even had a chance to fail. It was the memory of the prognosis that kept me awake. The doctor had looked at Gavin with grave sympathy and told him I had roughly 3 days left. My husband of 5 years had collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands, but I was still conscious then, drifting in a haze of pain, but aware. I felt him take my hand. His grip was not gentle. He squeezed my swollen, fluid-filled fingers until the bones ground together, a sharp spike of agony that cut through the morphine fog. He had leaned down, his breath warm against my ear, and I expected a final declaration of love. Instead, he whispered 2 words that froze my blood. Finally. Free. Then he had pulled back and let out a choked, theatrical sob that shook his shoulders. That performance was Oscar-worthy, but the smile I saw twitch at the corner of his mouth before he buried his face again was real. I did not die. A new specialist, Dr. Eris, had reviewed my charts on a hunch. She discovered that my liver was not failing from food, but from a severe allergic toxicity caused by the herbal supplements Gavin had insisted I take for my complexion. They switched the protocol immediately. The antidote flushed the poison out, and I woke up 3 days later, not in a morgue, but in recovery. When I opened my eyes, Gavin was sitting by the bed scrolling through his phone. He looked up, and for a split second, his mask slipped. It was not relief I saw in his eyes. It was sheer, unadulterated horror. He looked like a man who had bet everything on a horse that collapsed at the finish line. "Elena," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Oh my God, you are awake. They said you wouldn't. Water." I croaked, making my voice sound weaker than it was. I don't remember anything. My head feels empty." The tension left his shoulders instantly. He smoothed his expression into that of the doting, miracle-witnessing husband. "Shh, baby. Don't speak. You're safe. I'm here. I played the role of the invalid perfectly." I let my eyelids droop and pretended to sleep, watching him through my lashes. He did not hold my hand again. Instead, he paced the room, constantly checking his watch. Every 20 minutes, he retreated to the ensuite bathroom. Through the thin door, I could hear the frantic tapping of fingers on a screen, distinct and rapid. When he left to get coffee, I signaled to the night nurse, a kind woman named Sarah who had been tending to me since admission. "Can you hand me my phone?" I whispered. Gavin put it away, to let me rest. She retrieved it from the drawer. I tried to unlock it, but my Face ID failed due to the swelling. I typed in my passcode. Incorrect. I tried again. Incorrect. I went to reset it via my iCloud, only to find the password for that had been changed 2 hours after I was admitted. My blood ran cold. The fog in my brain lifted completely, replaced by a crystalline, icy rage. I remembered 2 months ago, Gavin had been relentless about our finances. "The market is volatile, he had said, pushing a stack of papers across the kitchen table. We need to move the assets to a tax-free investment structure. It's just a formality. Sign here and here. I had signed the life insurance upgrades. I had signed the power of attorney. I had signed my own death warrant. 2 days later, I insisted on an early discharge. I told the doctors I wanted to surprise my husband at home, and since my vitals were stable, they reluctantly agreed. I did not call Gavin. I called a taxi. The ride to Bellevue felt like a funeral procession for my past life. The rain lashed against the windows, blurring the gray Seattle skyline. When the taxi pulled up to our driveway, my breath hitched. There was a luxury sedan parked in the driveway that did not belong to us. A woman in a sharp blazer was standing on the front porch, hammering a sign into the manicured lawn I had designed myself. I rolled down the window, ignoring the rain that sprayed my face. The sign read, "Urgent sale. Cash only." I looked at the flyer she was holding. It listed our home, my sanctuary, for $2 million. That was $500,000 below market value. He was not just selling our house. He was liquidating my life while my side of the bed was still warm. I played the part of the fragile invalid to perfection. When evening came, I clutched my chest and feigned a coughing fit that left me breathless. "Gavin," I wheezed, avoiding his eyes. I think I need to sleep in the guest room tonight. My chest feels so heavy, and I don't want to keep you up with my tossing and turning." He did not even try to argue. "Of course. Babe, you need your rest. I have a big day tomorrow anyway." He closed the door to the master bedroom, effectively sealing himself off from the wife he thought was dying. I waited until the house settled into silence, counting down the minutes until I heard his heavy, rhythmic snoring. Then I threw off the duvet and moved through the dark hallway. My steps were silent on the hardwood floors. I slipped into his home office and opened his MacBook. The screen glowed blue in the dark room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I typed in his usual password, which was my birthday. Access denied. I tried our anniversary. Access denied. Then I remembered a notification that had popped up on his phone screen while he was in the bathroom at the hospital, a calendar alert for a date that meant nothing to me. July 14th. I typed the numbers in. The desktop unlocked instantly. My fingers flew across the trackpad. I bypassed his work emails and went straight to our joint savings account. The balance was pathetic. I clicked on the transaction history and felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my liver. There were massive transfers, tens of thousands of dollars at a time, funneled into an account for something called Vantage Consulting Group. I looked up the business registry. It was a shell company with a P.O. box in Portland. The next morning, Gavin adjusted his tie in the mirror, looking sharp and energized. "I have to drive down to Portland," he said, kissing my forehead with cold lips. "Client meeting for Next Gen Systems. It's a crisis. Or I wouldn't leave you. I'll be back late. Drive safe," I whispered, forcing a weak smile. As soon as his car left the driveway, I pulled up the Tesla app on my phone. He had forgotten that I still had access to the vehicle tracking. I watched the little red arrow on the map. He was not heading south on Interstate 5 toward Portland. He was crossing the bridge into Medina, one of the most exclusive suburbs in Seattle. I needed physical proof. I went to the kitchen and dug through the recycling bin he had neglected to take out, buried under empty soda cans and junk mail. I found a crumbled receipt. I smoothed it out on the counter. It was from Lux Bridal, a high-end wedding boutique downtown. The charge was for a non-refundable deposit of $5,000. I looked at the date on the receipt. It was dated the exact day I was admitted to the ICU. While doctors were shoving a tube down my throat to breathe for me, my husband was putting a down payment on a wedding dress for someone else. The bile rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had found online. Marks was a cheap private investigator, but the reviews said he was discreet. "I need you to tail a white Tesla," I told him, my voice steady. "I need photos, timestamps, and locations." Do not let him see you. I want a report every hour for the next 48 hours. Gavin returned that evening carrying a bouquet of flowers. They were carnations, the kind you buy at a gas station for $10. For my brave girl, he said, handing them to me with a beaming smile. I missed you so much today. I took the flowers and thanked him, even though I had already seen the pending transaction on our credit card statement. While he was buying me gas station flowers, he had spent $8,000 at Tiffany & Company. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Mark's. I went to the bathroom and locked the door to check it. The photos were grainy but clear enough. Gavin was not at a business meeting. He was sitting at a candle-lit table at the Pink Door, a 5-star restaurant near Pike Place Market. Sitting across from him, laughing with her head thrown back, was a woman I recognized from the society pages. Julianne Sterling. She was 28 years old, the daughter of a local real estate tycoon, and she was looking at my husband with adoring eyes. She had no idea she was dining with a murderer. She thought she was comforting a grieving man who was about to be free. Just you wait, Gavin, I whispered to the empty bathroom. Just you wait. Julianne Sterling was a digital open book, the kind with glossy, filtered pages. I spent the morning scrolling through her Instagram feed, analyzing the woman who was unknowingly funding my husband's double life. She was 28, wealthy, and painfully naive. Her feed was a shrine to her mystery man, a series of photos where Gavin's face was conveniently obscured by a giant sun hat or a strategically placed wine glass. The captions were nauseating. My warrior, she had written under a photo of Gavin's hand holding hers, helping him heal after so much tragedy, according to the narrative Gavin had spun for her. I was not merely sick, I was a monster. I was his ex-wife, a drug-addicted emotional abuser who was currently in a persistent vegetative state following an overdose. He was the saintly figure waiting for permission to pull the plug, fulfilling my alleged final wish to die with dignity. It was a compelling story. It was also a complete fabrication. I could have stormed into her life screaming like a banshee, but that would have made me look exactly like the unstable woman Gavin claimed I was. I chose a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer. I contacted Julianne through a burner account, posing as an exclusive interior designer named Elise, claiming I had been referred by a mutual friend for her new penthouse. She took the bait instantly. I arrived at her penthouse in downtown Seattle wearing a wig and oversized glasses. Julianne was even prettier in person, bubbling with the frantic energy of a woman in love. I want the nursery to be perfect, she chirped, leading me through the sprawling living room. Gavin, that is my fiancé. He has been through hell. His ex-wife. Well, it is a sad story. She is basically gone. Just a shell now. We are just waiting for the inevitable. I nodded sympathetically, gripping my portfolio so hard my knuckles turned white. He sounds very devoted. Oh, he is. She held up her left hand, flashing a diamond ring that caught the light. It was a Tiffany setting. I recognized it immediately because I had paid for it. He bought this with his savings. Can you believe it? He is sacrificing everything for our future. When is the big day, I asked, keeping my voice even. In 2 weeks, she squealed. We are doing a private ceremony in Napa Valley. Just us in the vineyards. We have to keep it quiet until the legal matters with his ex are settled. She pulled out her phone to show me the venue photos. As she swiped, a text message notification from My Hero popped up at the top of the screen. She tapped it without thinking, and I leaned in, reading the words over her shoulder. She is fading fast, baby. The doctor says maybe another 24 hours. I promise her assets will be the foundation for our empire. The cruelty of it punched the air out of my lungs. He was essentially text banking on my death. I decided the charade ended now. Julianne, I said, my voice dropping an octave, losing the fake polite lilt. That text, it is a lie. She looked up. confused. "Excuse me," I reached into my bag and pulled out my discharge papers from Providence Hospital and my driver's license. I slapped them onto her marble coffee table. "I am Elena Vance," I said, staring straight into her wide, terrified eyes. "I am the drug addict. I am the vegetable. And as you can see, I am standing right here in your living room." Julianne looked at the ID, then at me, then back at the ID. Her face went pale. No, this is crazy. Gavin told me. He said you were in a coma. He said you abused him. Call him. I challenged. Put it on speaker. She hesitated, her hands shaking as she dialed. The phone rang once, twice. What Gavin's voice barked through the speaker. It was not the voice of a grieving lover. It was the voice of a man interrupted. "I told you not to call me when I am with the lawyers. Julianne, I am trying to get the power of attorney signed so we can sell the house before she croaks." Julianne gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Gavin," I said, leaning toward the phone. "Honey, the lawyers might have a problem with that, since I am not actually dying." There was a silence on the other end, so profound it felt like the line had been cut. Then, a terrified stutter. Elena, how? "Wait." "Who is this?" I hung up the phone. Julianne collapsed onto the sofa, the tears coming fast and hot. She was not a villain. She was just a girl with a checkbook and a dream, targeted by a predator. We sat in silence for a moment. Two women swindled by the same mediocrity in a tailored suit. He borrowed $50,000 from me last week, Julianne whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "He said it was for your medical bills. He bought a watch," I corrected her, "and he tried to sell my house." Julianne wiped her eyes. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by the fury of a rich girl who had been taken for a fool. She looked up at me, and I saw a steeliness that I liked. "I have the best lawyers in the state," she said, her voice turning cold. "And I have a lot of money. Do you want to destroy him?" I smiled, and for the first time in days, it reached my eyes. "I don't just want to destroy him. Julianne, I want to leave him with nothing but the suit on his back." Julianne did not just hire a lawyer, she hired a weapon of mass destruction in a silk suit. An hour after our confrontation, we were sitting in the corner office of a glass skyscraper, facing Victoria Zhao. In legal circles, she was known as the asset guillotine, a woman who could strip a cheating husband of his net worth faster than he could zip up his pants. Victoria flipped through the dossier I had compiled, her sharp eyes scanning the bank transfers and the photos from the private investigator. "Washington is a community property state." "Ladies," Victoria said, her voice crisp and devoid of warmth. "Everything he acquired during the marriage belongs to the marital estate. By moving funds to a shell company in Portland, Gavin is not just hiding money. He is committing fraud. He is forging signatures. And with this attempt to marry Ms. Sterling while still legally wed to Mrs. Vance, we are looking at conspiracy to commit bigamy." "So we sue him now?" Julianne asked, gripping her designer bag. "No," Victoria replied, slamming the folder shut. "If we file for divorce today..." He freezes. He hides the crypto keys. He destroys the paper trail. "We do not want a divorce yet. We want a criminal indictment." She turned to me. "Elena, you have to go back." The thought made my stomach churn. But I nodded. Victoria laid out the plan. I had to continue playing the dying wife to give him a false sense of security, while Julianne would play the demanding mistress, squeezing him for cash. We needed him to make mistakes. I returned to the house in Bellevue before Gavin got back from his fake business trip. When he walked in, I was lying on the couch under a heavy wool blanket, looking pale and pathetic. "Hey, babe," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne and Julianne's perfume. "I have some good news. I found a buyer for the house. They are willing to pay cash. fast closing. We can use the money to move you to Arizona. The dry air will be so much better for your lungs. He placed the sale documents on the coffee table. He was selling our $2 million home for a fraction of its worth just to liquidate it quickly. I don't know, Gavin, I whispered, letting my hand tremble. This is our home. It is just a house. Elena, he said, his voice tightening with suppressed impatience. Do you want to get better or not? Just sign the papers. Please. For me? I reached for the pen he offered, but then I stopped. I need my lucky pen. In my purse. I retrieved the pen Victoria had given me. It was a specialized tool used by magicians and spies, filled with ink that vanished completely after 48 hours. I signed my name on the deed, but I deliberately altered the loop of the E and the slant of the V so that a handwriting expert could later testify it was under duress or forged. I also made sure the dictaphone taped to my chest was recording every word of his coercion. Good girl, he said, snatching the papers away. The next phase belonged to Julianne, the following afternoon, while Gavin was in the shower. I heard his phone blowing up with texts. Julianne was demanding proof of funds for a vineyard estate in Napa they were supposedly buying together. If you want to marry me in 2 weeks, I need to know you can pull your weight. Gavin, transfer the down payment to your main account now. She had texted him. Panic is a powerful motivator. Gavin spent the next hour locked in his office. Victoria's forensic accountants were watching in real time as he liquidated his offshore accounts. He transferred $300,000 from the Cayman Islands back to a U.S. bank, triggering a cascade of anti-money laundering alerts that Victoria had already flagged with her contacts at the FBI. He thought he was moving money for a wedding. He was actually wiring a confession to the federal government, but his cruelty had layers I had not yet uncovered. While searching for more financial records in his desk, I found a pawnshop ticket. It was for a 1967 Mustang, my father's car, the car my parents had left me when they died, the one thing I had refused to sell no matter how hard times got. Gavin had forged my title transfer and pawned it for quick cash 2 days after I was hospitalized. I sat on the floor, clutching the ticket, tears finally stinging my eyes. He had sold my memories to pay for his future. Then the landline rang, jarring me back to the present. I picked it up, expecting another realtor. Hello, may I speak to Gavin? A deep voice asked. He is in the shower, I said, my voice thick. May I ask who is calling? This is Robert Henderson, his regional director at NextGen Systems, the man said. He sounded grave. Actually, Elena, maybe it is better I speak to you. We have been trying to reach Gavin for 3 days. There is a discrepancy in the quarterly budget he oversees. A $200,000 discrepancy. I gripped the phone tighter. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Gavin was not just a cheater and a scammer. He was an embezzler. And he was frantically trying to fill that hole before the auditors arrived next week. Mr. Henderson, I said, letting a cold smile touch my lips. I think you and I need to have a long conversation. The air inside our Bellevue home had become thick and suffocating, charged with a static tension that made the hair on my arms stand up. Gavin was unraveling. The combination of my stubborn refusal to die and Julianne's manufactured demands for money was cracking his composure. He snapped at the slightest noise, pacing the living room like a caged animal, his eyes darting toward the bedroom door where I lay, supposedly fading away. On Thursday evening, he offered to make dinner. I made your favorite, he said, his voice straining to sound affectionate. Mushroom soup. You need to keep your strength up. I did not trust him for a second. Earlier that day, while he was ostensibly working, I had installed a tiny, motion-activated camera behind the spice rack in the kitchen. Now, safely behind the locked door of the guest room, I watched the footage on my iPad. I saw Gavin standing over the stove. I saw him take a small vial from his pocket. I saw him grind several white pills into a fine powder and stir them relentlessly into the steaming pot. When he brought the tray to my room, I sat up, feigning gratitude. "You are too good to me." "Gavin," I whispered, my hands trembling as I took the bowl. I don't know what I would do without you." He watched me like a hawk. "Just eat, babe. It will help you sleep." I managed to swallow one spoonful while he watched, fighting the urge to gag. Then, I asked him to fetch me a glass of warm milk. The moment he left the room, I poured the soup into a heavy-duty Ziploc bag I had hidden under the mattress. Later that night, I poured a small amount into a saucer for the stray cat that often prowled our porch. I watched from the window. The cat did not die, but within 10 minutes, it was sprawled on the deck, trapped in a deep, unnatural slumber. I sealed the rest of the soup in the bag. It was now biological evidence. I sent the video file and a photo of the sedated cat to Victoria. Her reply came within minutes. "This is attempted murder in the first degree. We have him. Elena. But wait, give him 48 hours. We take him down at the wedding." The next morning, Gavin stood by the door with a suitcase. He was wearing his best suit, though he had removed the tie to look casual. "I have to go to Portland for 3 days." He lied, avoiding my eyes. "The next-gen deal is falling apart, and I have to fix it personally. I hate to leave you like this." "I will be fine," I said, coughing into a handkerchief. "Just come back to me. I will," he said. He walked out of the room and closed the door. I heard the distinct click of the lock turning. Then, I heard the sound of a screwdriver working on the exterior handle. He was locking me in. A moment later, the landline phone on the bedside table went dead. He had cut the line at the box outside. He was leaving me trapped in a room without food, water, or medication for 3 days. He was not just waiting for me to die, he was ensuring it. I lay still, listening to the hum of the Tesla retreating down the driveway. I waited 10 full minutes to be sure he was gone. Then, I reached into the hollowed-out spine of an old copy of Wuthering Heights on the bookshelf and pulled out the spare master key I had cut a week ago. The lock turned with a satisfying snap. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The house was silent, but it no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a stage. And his scene was over. I walked out the front door, leaving it wide open. A long, black limousine was idling at the curb. The window rolled down, revealing Julianne wearing oversized sunglasses and a vengeful grin. "Get in, partner," she said. "We have a spa appointment. You look terrible." We spent the next 2 days in a sanctuary of steam rooms and facials, scrubbing away the scent of illness and betrayal. We were not just pampering ourselves, we were preparing for war. While a stylist applied a layer of foundation to my face, my phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "Asset freeze granted. Arrest warrant signed. The FBI is coordinating with local police in Napa. Showtime." On the morning of the wedding, I sat in the back of the limo, dressed in black. I opened my laptop and logged into my email. I had composed a message addressed to every single contact in Gavin's professional and personal network, including his boss at NextGen and the board of directors. The subject line read, "Obituary of Elena Vance and Rebirth." I hovered my finger over the enter key. "Are you ready?" Julianne asked, pouring 2 glasses of champagne. I was born ready. I said, I hit send. The sun over Napa Valley was aggressively bright, illuminating the rows of grapevines that stretched out like an endless green sea. It was the kind of day photographers dream of, perfect for a wedding that cost $300,000. The guests were a collection of Julianne's father's business associates, old money tycoons, and socialites who had never met Gavin before today. They sat on white Chiavari chairs, fanning themselves with programs that listed Gavin as a successful tech entrepreneur and widower-to-be. Though that last part was only whispered. Gavin stood at the altar, wiping sweat from his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. He looked handsome in a superficial way, but I could see the greed vibrating off him. His eyes kept darting to the side table where, per his request, Julianne's father had displayed a symbolic dowry presentation, a ceremonial check for $1 million intended to jumpstart their joint ventures. Gavin was practically drooling. He thought he had won. He thought I was rotting in a locked room in Bellevue, dehydrated and gasping for my last breath. The string quartet began to play Pachelbel's Canon in D. The heavy oak doors of the winery opened, and Julianne stepped out. She was a vision in lace and silk, a fairy tale bride walking toward her prince. Gavin straightened his tie, putting on his best humble groom face. But halfway down the aisle, Julianne stopped. She did not look at Gavin with love. She looked at him with the cold precision of an executioner. She raised her hand, and the string quartet stopped abruptly, the last note hanging awkwardly in the air. A split second later, the sound system roared to life. The soulful, brassy opening of Ray Charles's Hit the Road. Jack blasted through the speakers, shaking the floral arrangements. The guests murmured in confusion, heads turning left and right. That was my cue. I stepped out from the back row. I was not wearing a hospital gown. I was wearing a black velvet gown that clung to my body like a second skin, complete with a plunging neckline and a thigh-high slit. It was the dress of a grieving widow who had already moved on to her pool boy. I held a crystal flute of vintage Dom Perignon in one hand and a wireless microphone in the other. I sauntered down the aisle, my heels clicking on the stone path in time with the beat. When Gavin saw me, the color drained from his face so fast he looked like a wax figure left out in the heat. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He was staring at a ghost. How? He stuttered, clutching the altar for support. Elena, you are dead. I finished the sentence for him, stopping just a few feet away. I took a slow sip of champagne. Sorry to disappoint you, darling. The doctor said I had 3 days left, but it seems I am a little harder to kill than you anticipated. I snapped my fingers. Behind the altar, the massive LED screen that had been displaying a slideshow of Gavin and Julianne's love story flickered and changed. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. The screen now displayed a blown-up screenshot of a text message from Gavin to his offshore banker. The bitch is finally dying. Transfer the funds the second the death certificate is signed. The slide changed again. This time, it was a high-definition video. It showed Gavin in our kitchen, looking over his shoulder before grinding white pills into a pot of mushroom soup. The quality was crystal clear. Every guest could see the malice in his eyes. "What is this?" a woman in the front row shrieked. The slide changed one last time. It was a bank statement showing unauthorized transfers from my life savings into the Lux Bridal account. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice booming over the speakers, "you are not attending a wedding. You are attending an intervention for a serial con artist." Gavin looked around wildly. He made a move to run toward the side exit, but Julianne's father, a large man with a face like thunder, raised his hand. 4 private security guards stepped out from the shadows, blocking every escape route. "It is fake!" Gavin screamed, his voice cracking into a desperate falsetto. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "She is crazy. She has hepatic encephalopathy. It is the toxins in her brain. She is hallucinating, and she made all this up with AI." He turned to Julianne, reaching for her hands. "Baby, please. You know me. I love you. She is just a jealous, dying woman trying to ruin us." Julianne looked at his outstretched hands as if they were covered in slime. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. The crowd went silent. Then, she pulled her arm back and delivered a slap that echoed across the entire vineyard. It was a perfect cinematic strike that knocked Gavin's head to the side. "Do not touch me," Julianne hissed, her voice trembling with rage. And do not ever call me baby again." Gavin stood there, cheek turning bright red, realizing that the check for $1 million was never going to be cashed, and the only aisle he would be walking down was the one leading to a prison cell. "Checkmate," I whispered. I raised my glass to him and finished my drink. The wail of sirens cut through the pristine Napa air like a jagged knife, shattering the stunned silence of the vineyard. The sound came from the main gate, growing louder with every second, accompanied by the flashing of blue and red lights that washed over the white floral arrangements. Gavin looked toward the entrance, then back at the wall of security guards blocking the side exits. Panic overtook his greed. He made a desperate break for the center aisle, aiming to sprint past Julianne and disappear into the rows of grapevines. He did not make it far. As he lunged forward, Julianne shifted her weight with the grace of a dancer. She flicked the heavy silk train of her Vera Wang gown directly into his path. It was a subtle, deliberate movement. Gavin's expensive Italian loafers caught in the fabric. He pitched forward, arms flailing, and slammed face first into the hard-packed earth of the aisle. A collective gasp went up from the pews. Before Gavin could scramble to his knees, the police were upon him. Half a dozen officers swarmed the altar, weapons drawn but pointed low. A tall detective with a badge clipped to his belt stepped forward, looming over my husband, who was now covered in dust and grass stains. "Gavin Vance!" the detective barked, his voice carrying over the wind. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, attempted murder in the first degree, and conspiracy to commit bigamy. Get on your stomach." Now Gavin groaned, spitting dirt out of his mouth. "This is a mistake. You have the wrong person. I am a victim here." Two officers grabbed his arms and wrenched them behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs locking into place was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. They hauled him up to his knees. His designer tuxedo was ruined, torn at the shoulder and smeared with mud. He looked small. He looked pathetic. I walked over to him, my heels sinking slightly into the grass. I signaled to the officers to pause for a moment. They obliged. I leaned down until my face was inches from his, invading his personal space just as he had invaded mine in the ICU. I let a small, serene smile play on my lips. "You were right, Gavin," I whispered, mimicking the exact tone he had used when he thought I was dying. "Finally. Done. Finally. Free." His eyes bulged. The mask of the charming businessman shattered completely, revealing the rot underneath. "You bitch," he screamed, straining against the cuffs, spit flying from his mouth. "You ungrateful, miserable. I made you. You were nothing without me. You should have just died. Why didn't you just die?" The crowd recoiled. The guests, who had been whispering in confusion, now stared in horror. He had just confessed to the world. He had just shown everyone the monster I had been living with. "That is enough," Victoria Zhao said, stepping out from behind a row of flower arrangements. She looked impeccable in a navy power suit. She walked up to Gavin and slapped a thick envelope against his chest. "You have been served, Mr. Vance," Victoria said calmly. "Divorce papers from Elena Vance, citing irreconcilable differences and attempted homicide, and a civil lawsuit from Ms. Sterling for emotional distress and financial fraud totaling $3 million. "Take him away," the detective ordered. "Wait," another officer said. He reached for Gavin's wrist and unclasped the Rolex watch. Then he pulled the diamond ring from Gavin's pocket, the ring he was about to put on Julianne's finger. "These are proceeds of crime. Evidence." "That is my watch." Gavin howled as they dragged him backward down the aisle. "I bought that I earned that Julianne walked over to me." She signaled to a waiter who had been frozen in place near the altar. He hurried over with a fresh bottle of champagne. Julianne poured 2 glasses. We turned to face the aisle. As Gavin was shoved into the back of a squad car, kicking and screaming obscenities. Julianne and I raised our glasses. To trash taking itself out, Julianne said. To survival, I replied. We clinked the crystal flutes together. A photographer, realizing the wedding was over but the story was just beginning, snapped a photo. It captured two women in black and white, standing tall against the backdrop of a vineyard, toasting to the destruction of the man who had tried to play us both. It was the photo that would break the internet by morning. Julianne's father walked up to the microphone Gavin had dropped. He cleared his throat. Well, he boomed, his voice jovial. The groom is indisposed, and I have already paid $40,000 for the catering. I invite everyone to the reception hall. Let's not let the lobster go to waste. The tension broke, replaced by nervous laughter and then genuine applause. As the guests moved toward the reception tent, I took a deep breath. The sharp pain in my side, the phantom weight on my chest that had plagued me for weeks, was gone. It was not the antidote clearing my liver. It was the removal of a toxic, malignant growth that had been poisoning my life for 5 years. I took a sip of champagne. It tasted like freedom. The legal proceedings that followed were not a battle. They were a slaughter. Thanks to the comprehensive digital footprint Gavin had left behind and the video evidence of him poisoning my soup, the prosecution did not have to work very hard. The district attorney called it one of the most watertight cases of attempted murder he had seen in 20 years. But while the state was concerned with putting Gavin behind bars, Victoria Zhao was concerned with stripping him to the bone. Victoria utilized every inch of Washington state law to demand punitive damages. She argued that Gavin's actions were not just criminal, but malicious and premeditated, designed to inflict maximum physical and psychological harm. The judge agreed. The liquidation of Gavin Vance began on a Tuesday morning, and it was methodical, cold, and absolute. His assets were seized and auctioned off with terrifying efficiency. Marks, the private investigator, proved his worth 10 times over when he located a hidden USB drive taped under the drawer of Gavin's office desk. It contained the private keys to a cryptocurrency wallet holding about $150,000 in Bitcoin. Gavin had thought it was untraceable. Marks had cracked it in 3 hours. That money was seized immediately. His beloved Tesla Model S, the symbol of his status, was repossessed. His collection of vintage watches, including the Patek Philippe he had bought with my bonus check last year, went to the auction block. Even his designer suits were cataloged and sold. Then came NextGen Systems. The company was furious about the bad publicity and the embezzlement. Their legal team descended on the scraps of Gavin's estate like vultures. They filed a civil suit to recover the $200,000 he had stolen, plus legal fees. Since Gavin had already spent most of it on Julianne and his gambling debts, the court ordered that any future earnings he might ever make would be garnished until the debt was paid in full. He was going to enter prison with a negative net worth. The house in Bellevue was the final blow. Victoria successfully argued that since Gavin had attempted to murder me to gain sole ownership of the property, he had forfeited his share of the marital asset under the Slayer statute principles, even though I had survived. The judge ruled in our favor. The deed was transferred solely to my name. The $2 million home was mine, free and clear, serving as partial compensation for the physical trauma he had inflicted. Julianne was equally ruthless. She sued him for the return of every single gift, the $50,000 loan she had given him, and the cost of the wedding venue. She even slapped him with the bill for the flower arrangements. Gavin was destitute. He could not afford a defense attorney, so he was assigned a public defender, a tired man named Mr. Henderson who took one look at the mountain of evidence and gave Gavin the only advice that made sense. Plead guilty, Henderson told him. If you go to trial, they will give you life without parole. If you plead, we might get it down to 15 years, 2 days before his sentencing hearing. I went to visit him at the King County Jail. I sat on the metal stool in the visitation room, separated from him by a thick sheet of plexiglass. Gavin looked unrecognizable. He had lost 20 pounds. His skin was sallow, and his eyes were rimmed with dark, bruised circles. He looked at me, and then he started to cry. "Elle," he choked out, pressing his hand against the glass. "Elle, please, you have to help me. I can't do this. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was the stress, the debt. I just lost my mind for a minute." I watched him weep with the detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. I slid a single piece of paper through the slot at the bottom of the window. It was the divorce settlement. "Sign it," I said. He looked down at the paper. It waived his right to spousal support, his right to any remaining assets, and his right to ever contact me again. I can't," he stammered, his lip trembling. "If I sign this, I have nothing when I get out. I will be a beggar. You are already a beggar." "Gavin," I said. He hesitated, the pen hovering over the paper. He was still trying to calculate, still trying to find an angle. "I need to think about it," he whispered. I leaned forward. "Gavin, your mother is coming to the sentencing on Friday. Isn't she sweet? Catholic Mrs. Vance, who thinks her son is a martyr who was tempted by a wicked woman?" His eyes widened in panic. "Don't!" "I have the video of you and Julianne in the hotel room," I lied smoothly. I did not have a video of that, but he did not know what I had. "And I have the audio of you calling your mother a religious nutjob who you wished would hurry up and die so you could inherit her house too. Remember that phone call you made to me last Christmas? I did have that recording. I had saved everything. If you do not sign this paper right now," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "I will email those files to her pastor, and I will have them played at Sunday service." Gavin turned white. His mother was the only person left on earth who still returned his calls. You wouldn't," he gasped, struggling for air. "Try me," I said. He looked at my face and saw that there was no mercy left. With a shaking hand, he grabbed the pen. He scribbled his signature on the line, signing away his life. "Good," I said, pulling the paper back through the slot. "Enjoy prison. Gavin, I hear the food is terrible." It has been 6 months since the sirens faded from the Napa Valley vineyard, and the silence in my life is no longer terrifying. It is peaceful. My liver function tests came back 100% normal last week. The doctor told me I have the constitution of an ox, which made me laugh because I used to feel like a fragile bird trapped in a cage of Gavin's making. I sold the house in Bellevue. I could not live there anymore. The walls whispered with 5 years of lies, and the kitchen still smelled faintly of the mushroom soup that was supposed to kill me. The market was hot, and I sold it for $2,400,000, significantly more than the fire sale price Gavin had tried to force on me. With the proceeds, I bought a loft in Pioneer Square in downtown Seattle. It has exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, and not a single hiding spot for a secret. Julianne and I have become accidental sisters in this strange new reality. We meet for brunch every Sunday. Not to gossip, but to work. We launched a non-profit organization called the Vance Sterling Initiative. We help women who are trapped in financially abusive relationships to secure legal representation and emergency funds. You know, Julianne said to me last week over mimosas, "My dad always said I was terrible with money, but I think I am actually pretty good at spending it on the right things now." "You are?" I smiled, clinking my glass against hers. "You are doing great, Jules." We also received the final settlement from the liquidation of Gavin's assets. After Next Gen Systems took their cut and the legal fees were paid, there was a surplus of roughly $80,000. It was mostly from the sale of his hidden cryptocurrency and his precious watch collection. We split it 50-50. We called it our war trophy. I used my share to buy a kiln for my pottery hobby, something Gavin had always called a waste of time. My career has exploded. I went back to landscape architecture with a vengeance. My designs used to be soft, compliant, full of gentle curves and yielding flowers. Now, they are bold. I use jagged stones, steel structures, and resilient plants that can survive the harshest winters. My latest project, a public park named The Rebirth, just won a regional design award. A literary agent contacted me yesterday. She wants me to write a memoir, the story of the 3 days. She told me on the phone. It is visceral. Elena, women need to hear it. I am considering it. But for now, I am busy raising the love of my life. He is a golden retriever named Lucky. Gavin hated dogs. He said they were messy and needy. Lucky is messy, and he sheds on the velvet sofa. But when he looks at me, I see nothing but unconditional loyalty. I heard through the grapevine mostly from Victoria, who keeps tabs on things that Gavin is not doing well. Prison is a harsh place, and inmates have a particular code. They do not look kindly on men who poison their wives. He is isolated, paranoid, and spends his days looking over his shoulder, living in the same fear he once inflicted on me. This afternoon, the mail arrived. Among the bills and magazines was a plain gray envelope with the return address of the state penitentiary. The handwriting was familiar, though shaky. I stood in front of my gas fireplace, holding the letter. I could feel the weight of it. It was undoubtedly filled with excuses, gaslighting, or perhaps a final desperate attempt to manipulate my emotions. Elena Julianne asked, looking up from her laptop where she was working on our charity's website. "What is that nothing?" I said, my voice steady, "Just trash." I did not open it. I tossed the envelope directly into the flames. We watched in silence as the paper curled, blackened, and then disintegrated into ash. I did not feel a single pang of curiosity. I felt light. I realized then that I had won. The sweetest revenge was not seeing him in handcuffs, though that was satisfying. It was not taking his money, though that was just... The true revenge was standing here, in a home he would never enter, with a dog he would have hated, living a life that was entirely beautifully my own. "Come on, Lucky," I said, patting my leg. "Let's go for a walk." I walked out the door and did not look back at the fire. The final sentencing hearing was the closure I did not know I needed until the gavel struck the wood. It echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot, signaling the end of the war. Gavin stood at the defense table, but the man standing there bore little resemblance to the polished, arrogant husband I had known. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the span of 6 months. His hair was thinning, his posture was slumped, and the expensive suits had been replaced by a drab jumpsuit that hung loosely on his gaunt frame. The judge, a stern woman with no patience for white-collar cruelty, looked down at him over her spectacles. She did not mince words. She described his actions as calculated malice and a grotesque betrayal of trust. She sentenced Gavin to 18 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, citing the premeditated nature of the poisoning and the sheer scale of his financial fraud. As the sentence was read, Gavin turned his head slowly toward the gallery. He scanned the faces until he found mine. His eyes were wide and wet, pleading for a shred of sympathy, a single glance of acknowledgement from the woman he had vowed to love, but I did not give it to him. I was busy leaning over to whisper a joke to Julianne, who covered her mouth to stifle a laugh, while Victoria Zhao organized her files with the satisfied snap of a binder. We were a wall of indifference that he could not climb. 2 bailiffs moved in to take him into custody. As they grabbed his arms, Gavin's composure finally snapped. He thrashed against their grip, twisting his body to face me one last time. "Elena!" he screamed, his voice raw and desperate. "I did it all for us. You know I did. I did it for us. It was a final, pathetic lie, shouted into a room that knew the truth. I did not flinch. I did not even blink. I watched them drag him through the side door. his shouts fading into the corridor until the heavy door slammed shut, silencing him for good. I stood up, smoothed the lapels of my white blazer, and walked out of the courtroom. When I pushed open the double doors to the outside world, the flashbulbs blinded me for a second. A swarm of reporters and cameras had gathered on the courthouse steps. They shouted questions, vying for a soundbite from the woman who had come back from the dead to take down a con man. One reporter, a young woman near the front, thrust a microphone toward me. Ms. Vance, do you have any words for other women who might be in similar situations? What is your message to them? I stopped. I looked directly into the camera lens, thinking of the millions of women who might be watching, women who were tired, women who were doubting themselves, women who were trusting the wrong men. I smiled, and it was the most genuine smile I had worn in years. Don't ever ignore your intuition, I said, my voice clear and steady. If something feels wrong, it is wrong. And please, always remember to check your bank accounts. That evening, the Seattle rain was falling in soft, misty sheets, blurring the city lights into a kaleidoscope of color. Elena, Julianne, and Victoria sat at a table on the rooftop terrace of a bar overlooking the Sound. We were the only ones brave enough to sit near the edge in the drizzle, protected by a large heat lamp. Victoria poured a vintage red wine into 3 large glasses. We did not talk about Gavin. We did not talk about the trial. That chapter was closed. The book burned to what Julianne asked, holding up her glass. To justice, no, I said, shaking my head. I looked at the 2 women sitting with me. One had saved my fortune, the other had saved my sanity. To the 3 days. To the 3 days, Victoria echoed. We clinked our glasses. The sound was a bell ringing in the new era of my life. I took a long sip of the wine. It was rich and bold, with a spicy finish that warmed my chest. I looked out at the city, at the endless possibilities stretching out before me. I was 32 years old. I was healthy. I was wealthy. And I was free. I set the glass down and rested my hand on the table. Then, I covered it with my other hand, squeezing gently. I had the rest of my life ahead of me, and this time, I would be the one holding my own hand. Thank you so much for listening to my story and walking this journey of justice with me. Please comment below and let me know where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you all. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can reach and empower even more people.